One of the most frequently asked questions I get is what are the differences between a Lumos, a fine liner, and an Isograph pen? Starting with the Isograph pen, this is a very clever pen, and if you have one, I encourage you to use it because they can last a very long time. This is actually a very old Rotring, and you can see the plastic has started cracking slightly, and that can happen, but other than that, if you look after it, it can last you a lifetime, and it's refillable. So you have this ink cartridge here. You can fill that with pigment ink, waterproof ink, a whole variety. This has actually got fountain pen ink in it at the moment. And this works by having a tiny little needle that kind of sits in this part of the pen, and when you press it down onto the page, a little plunging kind of mechanism allows ink to flow through that part and onto the page. It's great. I mean, it's what a lot of professionals use. You can, one that says ISO on it means that it is a specific line width. So draftsmen and women would use it to get very specific line widths. Complaints that I've heard are it can be scratchy, and sometimes it can get clogged. So those are things to watch out for. And it can be quite expensive to actually change the tip. Say you drop that on the floor and it bent that tip, then you have to change this whole unit apart from the ink cartridge. So it does have its drawbacks, and we'll get onto that when I start talking about the Lumos. This is your kind of classic fine liner pen. So there's a big reservoir that sits in here, which has got pigment and waterproof based ink in. And then you can obviously get them in lots of different tip sizes. They're amazing pens. I use them a lot when I design. The line widths are fantastic, and the pigmented ink is lovely. So my main complaints around this, and the reason I designed the Lumos, are if that tip breaks, as you can see this one actually has. I think my daughter might have got hold of this. It writes it off. You can't use that pen anymore, which is a bit of a shame. And if you leave the tip exposed to the air, it'll dry out, and this then becomes a disposable pen. And even when the ink runs out, then obviously you end up having to either send it to the drawer of shame, where all the other pens that could have another life live, or it goes into the bin. So that brings me onto the Lumos. So the Lumos works very similarly to the fine liner in that it has a reservoir that sits in this part of the pen, and you can refill that with any pigment ink, pigment ink, fountain pen friendly pigment ink, which has these little nano pigment particles in it, so it doesn't clog the pen. They're very cagey about the inks that are used in these, but I'm pretty confident I've got pretty much the same, and it works beautifully in this pen. So you can still use waterproof ink, light fast ink, and pigmented ink. But you can also use any colour in your pen, which is an absolute treat. So I think this one's just got a standard black, and I believe that's a pigment in it. But say this dries out, instead of having to throw away the pen, all you have to do is replace this tip. And there are 9 different tips, including lovely brush tips. This is some fountain pen ink that I've put in this pen, and you can get that in a multitude of different colours. Fine liner tips are also really smooth on the page, so it means that there's less scratchiness when you're using, a textured paper per se. And the duo version means that you can have 2 different tips in the same pen. Obviously, I'm completely biased because I designed this pen, but I really love using these 2 pens and just wanted to improve it so it's better for the user and better for the planet. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your questions.